If you ever think to yourself, I bet there's some great jobs out there, I just can't find them, you could be right.
An important stat that I think people should know is that at any given time, 70% of jobs that are available are not posted online. There is a very, very large, what we would call hidden job market.
How do you get into this hidden job market? You don't need a secret handshake, but you might need to know someone. Hi, I'm Paul Haberstrood. Welcome to The Cost of Living. Online job boards were supposed to open up the world of employment. Turns out, a lot of doors are still closed. The good news, you may already know someone who could help you get a look inside. Also today, think about holding a stack of quarters. 5 of them. It's about an ounce. It's not heavy, but its weight in gold is worth $3,000. Gold is now trading near a record high. But why? Up first, what would you do if, hypothetically, a country, let's call it Schlamerica, wanted to eat your economic lunch? Steal your companies, jobs, head offices? You'd be in for a fight, right? Right? What exactly does Donald Trump want from tariffs? I mean, they're about fentanyl and national security and somehow getting money from other countries. 1 minute the U.S. doesn't need Canadian oil, but then it's, hey, let's build the Keystone XL pipeline. Trying to follow his logic can be like getting hit with a fire hose of conflicting statements. But Jen Keane, through all the noise, he does seem to come back to some core ideas.
And one of those core ideas, the one that seems to be at the root of all of this tariff talk, is that they are a way of bringing manufacturing back to America.
Under my leadership, we are going to take other countries' jobs. We're going to bring thousands and thousands of businesses and trillions of dollars in wealth back to the good old USA.
And he's not just talking about reshoring jobs from overseas. He's also talking about taking other countries' companies and making them into American companies.
So basically, he wants to drink our milkshake.
Yes. And here's the bad news. It might already be working. I spoke to a handful of Canadian manufacturers who've already moved some of their business down to the United States, or they're planning to do it. One of them is a company called Francor. It's a family business where Maggie Ori is in charge of sales and marketing. And the company manufactures hydraulic cylinders.
So hydraulic cylinders are basically the muscles of machines. So if you see a moving part on a machine, usually it's a hydraulic cylinder that's moving it up and down or whatever it's doing.
The company has about 45 people working in the plant in Cambridge, Ontario, and about a third of its sales go down to the United States. Now, tariffs on those exports would obviously hurt, so she's trying to figure out how to work around that.
Right now, we're looking at setting up more of an assembly facility down in the States. We've also thought about actually making the parts down there because, buying the steel there and just manufacturing it there would be less hassle and less expensive.
Okay, so if they do this, then what becomes of their Canadian operation?
Well, they'd keep their Canadian operation in Cambridge, but they already have a small footprint down in Texas, so some of what they make in Cambridge, they would shift down there. I also spoke to an environmental consulting company called Blue Metric, and part of its business is building water treatment systems. It recently bought a smaller American firm so that it could build a manufacturing base down in Florida.
Yeah, some big Canadian companies are looking at kind of similar things here. I mean, Brookfield Asset Management moved its headquarters to New York. It wants to tap into more money from U.S. investors. Barrick Gold's talking about doing the same thing.
Yeah, TFI International, the trucking company out of Montreal, announced that it was going to move down to the States.
Yeah, but then they changed their mind.
Yeah, after hearing from some angry shareholders. But these companies are saying out loud what a lot of Canadian companies are quietly thinking about. Alan Arcand is with the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association. Late last year, the association surveyed its members about the prospect of tariffs.
And one of the questions we asked is, would you consider shifting some or all of your production to the U.S. to bypass those potential trade barriers? And in fact, if tariffs are imposed, almost half of our members said yes, they are considering shifting some production to the U.S. to jump over that tariff wall.
Okay, almost half. That's not exactly what Canada wants to hear. But at the same time, let's put this into context, Jen. I mean, manufacturing is important, but it's only a portion of our economy.
That's right. And actually, it's a shrinking part of our economy. It makes up about 10% of our GDP.
So obviously these tariffs, if they hit manufacturing, they're going to hit deep, and that's going to have ripple effects into the rest of the economy. But it is not the entire ballgame.
No, but still, you have to understand the position that these potential tariffs put manufacturers in. They have built their businesses around the idea of free trade.
All these investments have been made over a long time under the assumption that Canada would have unfettered access to the U.S. market. So these tariff threats are, in effect, pulling the rug out from under the feet of manufacturers.
Yeah, these companies are suddenly like in a whole new world.
Yeah, they are. And I mean, Trump has said explicitly that if you want to sell to Americans, you need to build in America. And he's encouraging that in a couple of ways. One is through tariffs, but the other is by making promises like these.
Here is the deal that I will be offering to every major company and manufacturer on earth. I will give you the lowest taxes, the lowest energy costs, the lowest regulatory burden, and free access to the best and biggest market on the planet, but only if you make your product here in America. It all goes away if you don't make your product here.
Okay, so he's at least talking, making these promises about making the U.S. the easiest place in the world to do business, and Canada potentially is going to have to compete against that. Now, Trump's approach, it's very much zero-sum. It's one side wins, the other side loses.
It's been described as a kind of economic warfare. David Williams is the Vice President of Policy for the BC Business Council, and he says the thing about economic warfare is this.
Capital is ultimately a coward. Right? Capital will. Somebody is taking a risk with their money, with their pension money, for example, and they've got to figure out where to deploy it. And capital gets very scared of risk.
Capital is a coward. Wouldn't it be nice if capital were braver?
It really would. But, here's the other not so great news, David says, is that Canada is not starting from a place of strength. A lot of investment has already flowed south of the border long before Trump over the last decade. He says, just look at the BC forestry industry as an example.
They have U.S. operations. They're headquartered here, but they're U.S. operations. And over time, as it's become harder to operate in BC, for a number of reasons, including the mountain pine beetle, including the provincial sales tax, which is very difficult, the carbon tax, they've funneled all the new investment to their operations in the United States. And with Trump's election, you're going to see that across many industries.
So these Canadian companies, even before any tariff talk, they've already been spending more money down south. And of course, now we're in the world we're in. Is there a way that we can stem the tide here?
This is what everyone is talking about now. How do we turn this around? And a lot of ideas are on the table. Streamlining government regulations so they don't overlap. Reducing trade barriers inside of Canada between provinces. And making sure our tax rates are competitive.
Well, that last one, taxes, that's easy to say. Let's make them competitive. But we know this is like a political football, among other things. We lower corporate taxes. That could hit government revenues. There's got to be choices made around spending. Not everyone is going to be on board with that. No, but Trump could be forcing Canadians to make some of those choices because businesses are having to make decisions right now, like Maggie Orey with the hydraulic cylinder plant. She's looking at expanding down in Texas. Right. And she's a Canadian business owner and a successful Canadian business owner who's built that business here in Canada. How does she feel about doing this?
She doesn't love it. Her back's up against the wall. And she knows it could have ripple effects for people in Canada.
You don't want to lay off Canadian workers. However, if that is being produced elsewhere, if you're shifting it over to the States, you're going to have to pay the guys down there. You can't double pay, keep workers up here when you're already making it down there, right?
Those jobs down south, they wouldn't be new jobs. They would replace jobs here in Canada.
And that's really, as you say, Trump's endgame. That's what he wants.
Yeah, he's in it to win.
And so we need to be too. Thanks, Jen.
Yep, you're welcome.
On your radio and by podcast, this is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haberstrood. If you're looking for a job, all kinds of online postings and job boards are out there to help. But some of the best jobs don't ever get posted. So how do you get a crack at those ones if you don't even know they exist? Well, Daniel Nerman finds sometimes you got to ditch the technology and do things the old-fashioned way.
When Rose Asgarzadeh moved to Canada, she wasn't worried about finding a job. She had 14 years experience working as a university professor in Iran. And she taught human resources. So you probably thought you were pretty good at this, right?
Yeah, I know some ropes.
With her background, Rose figured she'd find something in HR. For 3 months, she scoured online job boards.
5 or 6 hours every day just going through the job posting, reading, changing my resume, and sending.
Rose fired off 500 resumes, but all she got was... April Durda sees this happen to a lot of job seekers. She's with Canada Career Counselling. April says if you're only applying for jobs on Workopolis or Indeed, you could be missing out.
An important stat that I think people should know is that at any given time, 70% of jobs that are available are not posted online. There is a very, very large, what we would call hidden job market.
Even in this digital world, April says most people still find jobs the old school way, through word of mouth or by being promoted internally. For one, it's cheaper for employers. Online job ads cost money. And Cheryl Nakamoto says the response can sometimes overwhelm HR teams.
When the economy slows like this and there's very few opportunities, if they put a posting up, there's a huge influx of everybody who thinks they can do this role apply.
Cheryl is with McNeil Nakamoto Recruitment Group in Vancouver. She says another reason you may not see a job posted, someone is about to get fired, and the company is quietly looking for a replacement.
They don't put up a posting because they don't want to alert within the company that there's this position coming up, right?
And then there's the matter of pay transparency. More provinces are mandating that salary information is included in job postings. But companies don't have to say what they pay if they don't advertise the job. So, how do you crack into the hidden job market?
You better work.
That's right. You gotta network.
Even when I'm speaking with clients and I bring up the word networking, sometimes there's a visceral reaction to that.
April Durda, the career counselor, says job seekers need to get offline and actually connect in the real world. And she says it's not that hard.
Sometimes it's as simple as putting it out into the world and saying, hey, I'm looking for work in this space. Do you know anybody?
So, pick up the phone, call your friends, call your mom's friends, or take a more guns blazing approach, like Rose. She messaged hundreds of strangers on LinkedIn, anyone who had anything to do with her field. And she ended up going out with 79 different people for coffee.
When I'm walking in the city, especially in downtown, most of the coffee shops are very familiar for me because I've been in most of them.
It paid off. Rose got 3 job offers. But
I don't drink coffee anymore.
For The Cost of Living, I'm Danielle Nerman.
This is The Cost of Living on your radio, by podcast, on Sirius Channel 169. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Remember Heart of Gold by Neil Young? Bum, 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 Heart of Gold. Neil wrote that in 1972 when gold was trading at about $60 an ounce. Well, that Heart of Gold is worth way more now. In the last few months, gold has surged to a record high, nearly $3,000 an ounce. Why is it suddenly looking so glittery? Campbell Harvey is a finance professor at Duke University in North Carolina. Campbell, hi. Thanks for being here.
Great to be on the show.
So when you look at what's happening with gold, just even over the last couple of months here, like, why is it on such a tear?
Well, gold is like a volatile commodity. Sometimes it goes up and sometimes it goes down. As for the recent episode in terms of getting to an all-time high, there's many reasons that the gold price has gone up. And one reason I think that is particularly important is this idea of deglobalization or de-dollarization. So, for example, China saw how the U.S. dollar was weaponized against Russia, and China does not want to be in that position. They need an alternative to the U.S. dollar, and their currency gains credibility the more gold reserves that they actually have. So they've been a buyer of gold. So that's kind of one reason. And then the other reason is just general heightened uncertainty, and people tend to think of gold as a safe haven. So those two factors, I think, largely drive what's happened in the gold space.
When you talk about central banks like China's central bank buying more gold because they saw the dollar, U.S. dollar, being weaponized against Russia, can you explain that a little more? Because that's kind of a heavy concept.
Yeah, so the dollar is kind of the reserve currency of the world. So it is by far the most important. The U.S. dollar is really the king right now. And the question is, well, given that the U.S. dollar is so important, if the U.S. gets into a conflict or disagreement with a country, they can actually do things that make it very difficult for that country to do business. And for example, Russia is a good example of this, where the sanctions were really focused on kind of the transferring of dollars and stuff like that. So you need, if you're an adversary of the U.S., to have an alternative. And right now, there's not many good alternatives. So the Chinese currency is nowhere near as important in the world as the U.S. currency, but they would like it to be important. So what do? Well, you want to have investor confidence in your local currency. And one way to do that is to have lots of gold reserves. Now, China has been buying gold, but they've got only a fraction of the U.S. reserves. So the U.S. has more gold in reserves than any other country by far. But the idea is that the more gold that China brings in, that will kind of increase confidence in the stability of their currency.
And I would think it wouldn't take a whole bunch of central bank buying, whether it's China or Poland or whoever else, when you add up all that buying to actually start moving the needle for the gold price.
Oh, that's exactly right. So there's not really that much gold in the world. The amount of gold mined throughout history is only like 191,000 metric tons. So there's not really that much gold. And if you look at the production of gold, the annual production is maybe 3,000 metric tons a year. So this is kind of a conundrum for China because to get to the level of reserves that the U.S. has is going to be very difficult for them because they need to be buying a very large amount of the production of gold. It helps that they're a major producer of gold, but still, when you're buying that much, it tends to drive the price up.
So that's one piece of what's happening with gold. We've got central bank buying. You mentioned the term safe haven. What is the thinking behind that?
So it is a historical fact that people have long considered gold a safe haven. And there are two dimensions to the safe haven. One is this idea of gold being like an inflation hedge. And the second part is gold can be like a crisis hedge, like a world war or something like that, where, for example, one country's currency might go to zero in the war. But if you got gold, that is something that is more universal. So on the first part for inflation, it is a fact that gold over the last 2,000-3,000 years has held its value in kind of inflation-adjusted terms. So gold has been a reliable hedge against inflation. So it holds its value. So I think part of this comes from the fact that it's been around so long and has been recognized as being valuable for so long. And also gold has got some uses. So 70% of gold is used in jewelry, 5% in technology. So it does have actual tangible value. The other part, of course, is the safe haven that if a country is going through difficult times, people tend to diversify. You don't want to hold just your own country's currency. You want to diversify, and gold is kind of a logical thing to actually look at. The evidence, of course, is another matter.
Well, let's talk about the evidence. I mean, is there another – people say gold is a safe haven. When you look at the numbers, is gold actually a safe haven?
So I said that gold has held its value over the past 2,000-3,000 years. And I say that based upon evidence. So what we did in our research with Claude Herb called the Golden Dilemma, we looked up the wages of Roman centurions 2,000 years ago. And the Romans kept great records, and we know how much they were paid. We've actually got in museums the coins, and we can figure out the gold content. So we actually worked out the number of grams of gold or ounces that a Roman centurion was being paid. And then we looked to see what that was worth today. And it turns out that it's approximately what a U.S. Army captain would earn. So again, it's remarkable that over 2,000 years, gold has held its value. We also have another exercise where we look at...
Wait, no, I got to ask that. That is wild. A Roman centurion is basically making the same wage as a U.S. Army captain. Like what is that in today's dollars?
So it was about $75,000.
All right.
Yeah. So this is consistent with gold holding its value on an inflation-adjusted basis. But this is really important insight. That's over the extreme long term. So most of our horizons are not measured in millennia. It might be decades, but it's not millennia. So gold, as I said, is very volatile. So as volatile as the stock market. So there could be extended periods where gold does not hold its value with respect to inflation. And there could be extended periods where gold does better than inflation. So over the shorter horizons, gold is an unreliable hedge against inflation.
You know, we on this show would never, ever, ever give investing advice nor ask anybody for investing advice. I want to make that absolutely 100% clear. But if you could go back 2,000 years and give some advice to that Roman centurion who just got paid in gold, what advice would you give the centurion? Where would you say they should put their gold? In gold or maybe not?
Yeah, so actually it's okay to hold some of the safe asset. But if you want appreciation in your portfolio, then you need to take some more risk and invest in other things. And that might be a small business. Of course, there was no stock market back then. So there is a role in any investor's portfolio for some safe assets. But again, we need to be careful here because the safe portfolio isn't always safe.
All right, well, as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, maybe my advice would be some seaside property on the Amalfi Coast might be lovely and be worth something someday to the Centurion. But Campbell Harvey, thank you so much for all that.
Thank you.
Campbell Harvey is a finance professor at Duke University in North Carolina. Coming up next week, the threat of tariffs is pushing the loonie lower. But, and this may seem counterintuitive, the more it slides, the more it may take the sting out of Trump's trade war. How's that for a silver lining? The loonie as tariff shock absorber. That's next week. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. The show is produced by Daniel Nerman, Blair Sanderson, and Jennifer Keane, with help from Jeff Kynock. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Thanks for listening.